thanks everybody for tuning in today. I am Mike Monteforte, and I appreciate you signing on and checking out our podcast today. I am really excited about this one. I have with us a very good friend of mine, attorney colleague, Jennie Tannenbaum. She is the owner and attorney at Simply Good Law. Jennie, thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast today. I really, really appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, give me real quick, very basic, who you are and what you do, and we'll get right into it.
Okay, thank you for having me, Mike. My name is Jennie Tannenbaum. I'm the owner of the law practice Simply Good Law, and what I do there is twofold. I'm an employment law lawyer, first of all. I represent both the employers and the employees, and I also am a small business attorney. As a small business attorney, usually people end up hiring an employment law lawyer after they have a small business attorney to set up their attorney. But I wear both hats essentially, Mike.
See, that's pretty cool. I like that because there's a lot to be said for a one-stop shop. Whereas I don't have to go hire one person to do this, and then I got to hire somebody else to do that. But you can kind of provide both of these services from the entity creation to then representing the client beyond that. So that's really, really cool. And the area of law where you practice, I find it really interesting because I know as my business from when I started out as kind of one person, sitting in a room and then trying to grow and expand over time, I know I'm screwing stuff up. And so, having an expert that does what you do, that kind of sees this stuff and knows what we should be doing as employers, what we shouldn't, I think is so beneficial, especially to small business today, because we as business owners, we don't always know the rules and regs and the way we're supposed to handle things like HR, and you must see it day in and day out. But before I get into that, because I want to talk to you all about what you do and the services and the stuff you see every day that we as business owners make mistakes with, I want to know first how you got there. What brought you into this field? What made you become a business and employment lawyer? How'd you get here?
Okay, well, essentially, when I was a kid, I loved to write short stories. So I knew from that moment on that my career would involve some type of writing. I decided to go to law school, and from there I was doing different types of clerking or internships to try and figure out what I enjoyed the most. And while I was in law school, my dad actually had an issue with his employer, and we didn't know there weren't employment attorneys at that time. It's a relatively new niche that's probably started in the early 90s or so. So during that time, it was just beginning. That was when I was just finishing up law school. And he ended up going to a contract attorney because that was about the closest to an employment attorney at the time that you could get to.
Right.
And I ended up clerking for an employment attorney for some time. And I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. I saw what my dad went through, and I knew that there were people who needed the same services that my dad did. There were attorneys there who needed to understand the workplace, what type of laws that were necessary there in order for the employees to feel that they were getting the safeguards from the law, and that the employers need to understand that their employees had certain rights, and they had to within certain ramifications work with them when there were issues, such as if there were things such as the Family Medical Leave Act, which attorneys now have made prevalent so that their employers that they represent understand that it's something that they need to understand and provide to their employees if there's a family member or if the employee themselves happens to need leave for a medical reason.
Right. Gotcha. So that makes sense. That's funny. I have a lot of lawyers I talk to, but me included, the way I found myself becoming an elder law attorney or estate planning attorney is because I got into it to help my grandparents when my grandfather got sick. And so I had a family member that was facing this issue, and to figure out a way to try and help my grandparents, and that led me into, the field that I'm in now. So to hear kind of something similar from you, you're trying to help your father. He had this legal issue, and you did that, and you found your niche through the experience of helping a family member when maybe you didn't know before that's the path that you were going to go down. So
Right.
interesting like that. If you had asked me when I was getting out of law school if I was going to be an estate planning lawyer, I don't think I would have said no, but I don't think I would have said yes either. And it just, the circumstances brought me here. And so it's funny. It sounds like it's very similar to what happened to me is what you went through as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting how life prompts you to where you should be and where you need to be.
Right? Just have to listen.
You do.
So talked a little bit about wearing two hats, right? The beginning, helping maybe someone start a business and create a new business entity. So I want to ask you a little bit about that. And then we want to talk about some of the services that you provide to employers and employees once, the business is set up and established. So going back to the beginning, and you've got, say, a client that's coming in to see you, wants to start a new business. Do you help them with, for example, a choice of entity? Should I be filing a corporation? Should I be filing an LLC? Do you offer advice on what's best for that client?
Yes, one of the things that I do is I help them determine what is the best entity for the business that they're starting. Often people will come to me and say they want an LLC because that sounds like it's like the new kid on the block. That may not exactly be perfect for them. So I sit down and I ask them, are they going into business with partners or is it themselves? That will help determine what type of entity it should be, as well as their tax ramifications. So at that point, I suggest that they work with the CPA, who I work with as well. And together we can determine what is best for not just right now, but the long term. Where do they see them 3 to 5 years from now? Where is the business going to go? So that all has an impact in determining what the correct entity is. And from there, we go and we set up the structure. We set up an operating agreement, which is very important because it determines exactly how the business will be operating. That is everything from finances to voting to adding members to selling their stocks. And from there, we decide whether they're having employees or they're having independent contractors. And that's where the employment side comes in. That setting up the employees would mean having an employee handbook to determine what the policies are. That employee handbook will in turn help to safeguard the business from potential lawsuits. It also helps the employees as well, because the employees can look and say, oh, well, I need to take time off, PTO. How do I do that? They can refer to the handbook. So the handbook is for both. It's mutually beneficial to the employers and to the employees.
Gotcha. And I hear the same thing when you mention the LLC kind of being the new kid on the block. I hear that all the time where, someone will call us, well, I'm trying to start an LLC. Because again, it's a newer term. People are hearing about it. They don't always, and I don't expect the client to know, say, the difference between an S corp or a corporation and an LLC. So to be able to provide the guidance that you do to the client is very important, because aside from the fact that the LLC has higher filing fees every year, than a corp does, there are other aspects as well that are different, including the tax ramifications that you mentioned. But I also like that you said that you're looking also, yes, there's today, right? We're forming the business today, but let's project out a little bit and let's look at 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, because that's something that's not always easy for a new business owner to do. But where they want to go or what their plan is, or where they want to be in 3 years or 5 years, really can affect that choice of what entity you recommend. Because if you may be in a certain situation today, but you're planning to be in a different situation in 3 years, 5 years, you're making money, you might have employees, that sort of thing.
Right.
So taking that into consideration, I think, is something that people kind of could accidentally just forget because they're focused on the now. But it sounds like that part of it is important when you're trying to figure out what the heck entity you're going to form in the first place, right?
It's very important. That's where estate planning, what you do and what I do, that's where we're similar. We're always looking into the future. What's going to happen if we do this? What are the ramifications and where do they want to be? Where does the estate want in 3 or 5 years? Where are they expecting things to go? And what is going to be the outcome if we make this particular decision now? How is it going to impact our clients 3 to 5 years from now? So it's very important to not just think of the present moment, which we should all be in, but also to project forward and see, okay, well, if we make this decision now, what's the outcome now? How will that affect our clients?
Yeah,
So it's a very important part of employment law, as it is, I'm sure, part of your practice.
especially in when you mentioned, for example, that employee handbook, and that it's mutually beneficial to have one of these handbooks in place. So when it comes to my business, when we're doing wills, trusts, things like that, I tell clients that I hate gray area, right?
Yeah.
I don't like to leave anything up for grabs, anything that can be questioned. I like to have a document where the answers to my questions can be found in that document, if for nothing else than to have clarity and for everyone to know their responsibilities. So when you've got an employee handbook, we're stating what the employer's responsibilities are, what the employee's responsibilities are, what are our rights and what our obligations are. And having that down in writing is better for everybody, because there's no question about who's supposed to do what. I mean, is that what you find as well? Just that it's not just protecting the business, which is great, but that for on the employee side as well, that it's helpful and beneficial to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just like you said, in your area, you don't want gray areas. In the employment law area, we don't want gray areas either. We want to make sure that if the employer, say, for example, has somebody that they need to terminate, that there is a policy written in the handbook, they follow that policy, and they follow that policy with every single person that they need to terminate. If they don't follow that policy and they terminate people based on different things and in different methods and don't have a protocol, that could get them well into a lawsuit. And it also helps the employee as well, because the employee can see, well, hey, I'm fired because I was tardy 3 times. I remember signing an employee handbook when I started. Let me check the employee handbook and check under the heading of tardiness and see what that says. And they look in the employee handbook and it says after 4 times of being tardy, you can be terminated. So the employee then can go to their manager and say, look, it's documented here. You sent me this letter and we have 3 dates here, the 3 dates that I was tardy, but here's the employee handbook. Here's my sign-off sheet, which is in my HR file right now, that I signed off on this so-and-so date. And I've only been tardy 3 times. I know only 3 times doesn't sound great, but according to the handbook, it says 4 times. So I have one more shot. You need to give that to me. And so that helps the employee, and the employer is like, oh yeah, okay, he's right. Because if he went and if the employee didn't confront him and decided, instead of talking to my manager first, I'm just going to go hire a lawyer right away. That actually saved the employer from a lawsuit, because the employee went to him, had open communication. He said, hey, you're right. You're absolutely right. You got one more shot. So just make sure you're not tardy again, so we can keep you on. So that's an example of how it's mutually beneficial to both parties.
And then we're making sure that we're applying the rules the same to everybody. So because we've got this written policy, it's not, well, one manager is firing employees because they're tardy 3 times. Someone else is doing it because they're tardy 4 times. And we don't have a rule or a regulation in place. So it makes sure, like you said, we're treating everybody the same. And there isn't this, kind of subjective, doing it one way over here and a different way over here. So let me ask you this, and I'm sure there are a lot of businesses that have employees that operate without an employee handbook.
There are.
When I first started to add employees, I was guilty of that for a little while. So then what happens? I start adding employees, and I hired a payroll company to do my payroll. And the payroll company says to me, hey, as part of your benefits, we offer a template for an employee handbook, and we share it with people that use our payroll services, and that can be your employee handbook. But even in that case, do you recommend that even if someone's going to use one of these templates or finds one online, do you recommend that we have these things looked at by a lawyer? Do you find that some of these pre-written templates or forms are deficient in some way, where maybe we think as business owners we're covering ourselves, but we're really not? Do you see problems with this stuff?
I do see problems with it, and I have seen some of those templates, and you're right, the payroll companies do offer them as part of their services, and it sounds great to the business owner because they're thinking, wow, this is a one-stop shop. I can get this taken care of. I don't have to worry about the employee handbook. But in reviewing those templates, they're very bare bones. They're not specific to the state of Massachusetts, and the state of Massachusetts has some very different employee and employer state laws that other states have, and that the federal government doesn't offer. So it's really important to have it state specific and also industry specific, because there are certain industries where you have to meet certain standards, and those have to be in an employee handbook as well. So what you're getting from the payroll company is a bare bones one. So what that means is you may or may not be covered. And it's better to be completely covered. Going back to what you said, Mike, about no gray areas, having that template from a payroll company is a gray area. We don't want that.
Yeah. So getting into kind of the services you provide, and this handbooks being just one aspect of that. But so for right now, I've got a business. I've been at it for a little while. I've got 9 employees. Can I come to you and say, hey, I need you to write a handbook for me? This is our, these are our basic, what our procedures are and the way we run things. But, can you write me a handbook that's going to protect me and my employees and make sure that we're all covered and we're all the same, on the same page? Is that something that a business owner can hire you for to help them with?
Absolutely. It's never too late. They can be in business 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and not have a handbook, and it's something that they should have. So the sooner they have that, it's protection. It's protection from liability for them. It's almost insurance. And what I would do is I would sit down and we would go over with the business owner what exactly their mission is, because every business has their own mission or their own ethics. We start with that, and then we go into the law and the very specifics, and then we go into the industry specifics. So it's something where we work together and we cooperate to build this handbook together.
Okay, so that's very eye-opening for me. In fact, I think separately, I need to talk to you about that, because I think that the one I have it needs work, and we probably need to start fresh. So I'm gonna have a separate conversation with you about that, selfishly with regard to my own stuff. Aside from that, if I am, whether I'm an employer or I'm an employee that's having some issues and have some questions, what are some things that you can help me with, whether I'm an employer and I'm running a business, whether I'm an employee and I either have questions about my company or I'm having some issues with the employer that I'm working for? How can you help me, whether I've got an employer hat on or an employee hat on? What can I come and see you for? What can you help me with?
Okay, well, for employers, I can certainly help them determine whether they're in compliance with wage and hour laws, whether their contracts with vendors or employment contracts are adequate and sufficient. I can help them with if right now, because of the recession, unfortunately, there are a lot of RIFs, reduction in force. So I've been doing quite a bit of severance agreements to make sure that what they're offering is fair and equitable and within the confines of the law. And for the employees, I can take a review of those severance agreements to make sure that what they're being offered is fair and equitable too, and they're not giving up rights that they shouldn't be giving up. For employers, I also do a lot of employment discrimination litigation, which is having to do with employees who are either wrongfully terminated or retaliated for either whistleblowing or doing something that they have a right to do. In other words, maybe they took Family Medical Leave Act, so now they have been either demoted or they've been given lesser hours or they're treated differently. So in other words, the employee would come to me and say, this has happened as a result of me taking time off. Is this legal? What can we do? How can I be reinstated and get my hours back? Also, what has really been interesting to me was when I started with employment law, I did a lot of employment discrimination. And a lot of that was disability for people who are disabled, and they either were being discriminated at the workplace because of their disability and not giving an accommodation. So since then, I've actually gone back to my roots, which doesn't mean that I'm not taking other employment cases or small business cases, but I actually had a health scare this year, and I finished up treatment. I had some cancer. I finished it up, but during the time I was getting treated, I was speaking to other chemo patients, and they were telling me they didn't know I was an employment attorney. I was just another person there getting chemo. And they said to me, hey, you know what? I'm really nervous because I'm taking time off from work, and they're telling me that I can't take this time off, but I need to get the treatment, and my family depends on me for this paycheck. What am I going to do? And so that got me thinking, and I did a little bit of research and understood that cancer is actually considered a disability. So I was thinking, how can I help these people? There's a need there. So I'm trying to get back to doing a little bit more of disability law, but I'm still doing the small business law and the employee laws and handbooks and cases like that.
That's really interesting too. And again, like we said, sometimes, life puts you where you need to be. And there you are talking to people that don't know you're an employment lawyer. You're there getting treatment the same as they are. And they're expressing this concern about work, and I need my paycheck and I'm taking off, time to get treatment. And I totally understand that, especially when it comes to small businesses, because you've got, on the one hand, you've got an employee that needs this time. He needs to be able to go do this treatment, and at the same time needs their job. And then on the other side of the coin is you've got maybe a small business that's got a handful of employees that can really struggle if an employee isn't there for an extended period of time. So it's difficult, kind of waters to navigate without, having an expert that really knows what they're doing. So that's super interesting to me. I'm going to talk to you more about that too. So tell me this. So one of the things that I like to provide for clients of ours or people that listen to our podcast, as I like to provide insider information. Sometimes we call it inside baseball. Some tips or tricks or tactics that you're seeing in your day-to-day, and it's some kind of common mistake, whether it's handbooks, whether it's something else, something that you're seeing, geez, most business owners fail at this, or employees a lot of times make this mistake when they're going in and starting a new job or leaving a job. Tell me something, whether employer side, employee side, something that you're seeing that's, geez, this mistake happens all the time, and I wish people knew so that they could avoid it.
Well, I think for employees, the most frequent thing I see is that they're afraid to approach their managers or supervisors, their employers, when there's an issue, and they try and handle it on their own. And that's where the biggest stumbling block is. I've seen where people say, well, I think I was harassed at work and I wasn't sure, and it happened a few more times, and I was embarrassed to go to the manager or supervisor and tell them that this person was harassing me based on my race, my sex, or sexual harassment or gender. And so I tried to take care of it on my own. The best thing to do is when something happens, and even if you're not sure about it, is to go directly to their supervisor or manager and say, look, this happened between me and Eddie, and I'm not sure, but it happened a second time and a third time, but I think that you should know. And you need to make the employer aware, because then the employer can step in and rectify or resolve whatever issue there is. or they could get to the bottom and do an investigation. And people, I see that people suffer needlessly because they think that they need to handle it themselves, and people really shouldn't suffer needlessly.
No.
Yeah, it's awful to see the suffering because the employer has a duty to ensure that the workplace is a safe and comfortable atmosphere for you to work at. And so for employees, that's what I say. Please don't try and do it on your own. Go to the employer. They're there to help you. And
Yeah,
the
I
law is
agree.
there too.
You
I'm
know,
sorry.
why don't we do this? If I'm an employer and I've got an issue, or I'm an employee and I have an issue, and I want to seek out your help for you to
Mhm.
assist me, tell me best way to get in touch with you. Do I go to your website? Do I call you? Is it either or? Give me some contact information, because I know clients of mine that have their eyes on this or ears are going to want it. So let's do that, and then I promise I won't make you talk anymore.
Okay. Sounds like a deal.
Yeah.
My website is simplygoodlaw.com, and my phone number is 978-681-0017. So whatever works best for them, if they would like to go via my website or if they would like to do a direct dial.
Okay, perfect. It was eye-opening for me, and I really and I mean it. I gotta come see you myself. So I appreciate you taking some time for me today, and for being on the podcast. I know that the people that listen to my stuff are going to be super interested in this. I represent a lot of business owners, so this was fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. It means a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to speak. I really appreciate that, Mike. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
You're so welcome. Have a great holiday, and I appreciate it. Thank you again.